Sandbagging is one of the most common tricks during practice runs in Formula One racing. Almost all of the race teams hide how fast their cars really are. They want their competitors to think this is all we've got and that they will be the slower teams before the season starts. However, Mercedes is one of the famous teams that does this trick all the time, but for the first time ever, the team from Brackley actually meant it when they said they were the underdogs. So that's why we don't need to ask ourselves again, is Mercedes really hiding their speed? And what does Red Bull think about this? Throughout the whole 2022 season, we saw Mercedes have trouble understanding the new car rules. Because of this, they didn't get good results. However, we're not used to seeing Mercedes struggle for a long time. That's why everyone was happy to learn that before practice testing, the W14 car was much better than the W13 car in the computer simulator. This is what Russell and Hamilton said. But the Mercedes fans were a bit sad to see how the car really performed on the racetrack during the first and only 3 days of practice testing in Bahrain. At one point, Hamilton was 0.7 of a second slower compared to Verstappen's times. Even if the team is hiding some speed and not showing their full performance, it's clear that this is a huge gap to make up all at once. Sure, Mercedes can definitely overcome this difference, but given their history with the 2022 rules and the weird side pod design that only they use on the grid, big question marks have appeared about the Brackley team. To make things worse, Hamilton wasn't really happy with how the car performed in Bahrain during practice testing. When comparing the W14 with the car before it, the most troublesome car that ever came out of Brackley, Hamilton wasn't truly happy to point out the problems of the 2023 race car. When asked about it, he said it's hard to sum up the progress. On the new car, we've had a couple of difficult days and yesterday was really difficult. The first day didn't feel too bad. Yesterday was more of a struggle. George has had a much better morning today, so things are getting better. So hopefully we've got the car set up in the right place now. For example, the bouncing that we had has pretty much gone away. That's a huge step for us. It's nice to drive it without the bouncing in the corners, but there are still some basic things that we're working through. Some of the balance problems that we had last year are still there. I'm really proud of everyone in the team for staying positive after a tough year last year. It's clear that Mercedes is very unlikely to struggle with porpoising in 2023, which was a huge challenge for them to overcome last year. But does that mean that all their problems are gone with the bouncing? According to Hamilton, even though the team has found some great speed compared to this time last year, and the car does behave better, there is still a mountain to climb to put themselves where they want to be. And right now it's clear that the place they would want to be is Red Bull. The Austrian team is looking to repeat its success from 2022 for the second time in a row. While Mercedes hopes that the rule changes would change some of the story, it's clear that the work they need to do is still in the garage and it's going to be much easier said than done. Toto Wolff has hinted that the car will get some changes after the first couple of weeks of the new season, especially in the sidepod design. This shows that Mercedes has big plans for the future. While he was sure that the performance they are missing isn't coming from the sidepod design, he is ready to accept a new design for the W14, one that could help the W14 go on to win the championship at the end of the season. If it turns out to be a total revolution in the technical rules set last year, at this point it's very hard to tell whether Mercedes is holding something back from Ferrari and Red Bull or not. But according to Wolff, they haven't unleashed the full potential of the W14. That is something that Christian Horner also agreed with. When asked about whether Mercedes will be Red Bull's main rival in 2023, Horner said, "Very difficult to say. I mean, Ferrari looked like they are quick. Mercedes' form is difficult to read at the moment. Are they holding something back? We'll see this time next week. I think all will become clear. Obviously, all secrets will be revealed once the qualifying session in Bahrain comes, but at this point it's very hard to believe that the teams will make huge steps compared to where they were in the practice testing in Bahrain. One thing is for sure, Mercedes will have a much better and much more competitive car than 2022, but whether it will be enough to challenge the raging bulls and prancing horse ahead of them remains to be seen." A very unusual conversation has been started on the grid and has been supported by many members such as Hamilton and Horner. That's the progress of Aston Martin. If there's one thing that we've learned about Aston Martin in 2022, it's that they aren't close friends with competition and performance. But in the second half of the season, the UK team showed some teeth and climbed 3 spots in the team championship. Now with the addition of Alonso and with the amazing times that have been set in practice testing, it's clear that Aston Martin has put itself as a favorite up front. This is something that Ted Kravitz spoke about. The Sky F1 expert went to the extent of saying that Aston Martin currently has better speed compared to Mercedes and that they are the 3rd fastest team as we speak. When talking about this matter, Kravitz said, "I've got Aston Martin 3rd and potentially even a little bit closer to Ferrari. That's to do with Fernando Alonso's race run in Saturday's Bahrain GP long runs. Such as it was, it would have been Max Verstappen, Perez and Alonso on the podium ahead of the Ferraris and Mercedes. Aston Martin had Red Bull worried from day one. Newey mentioned them in the teams he's concerned about. The car is basically good. It has some nice ideas. Alonso's race run on Saturday was nice. Furthermore, Kravitz called out Mercedes and said that if the team wants to improve and fight at the front, they need to make a huge step in the next couple of days. Obviously, he pointed out that the team is struggling with some of the issues from last year. While the porpoising is definitely gone, the W14 is struggling with drag and balance problems, as explained by Hamilton. This is why many are wondering whether Mercedes is really sandbagging or whether these are all issues that will haunt the Brackley team yet again. According to the 3 days that the drivers spent in the desert, it's more likely that the second scenario will come to life. One thing is definitely certain, and that's Mercedes holding a bit of performance compared to what we saw in the practice testing. Now, if this turns out to be the truth, Mercedes needs to be really careful because other teams are also holding back performance. It doesn't necessarily mean that they'll fly through the grid and instantly be better than Ferrari and Red Bull until the first couple of races. The question of Aston Martin will remain open because it's not just Mercedes that's concerned about the UK team. Therefore, a huge challenge lies ahead for Mercedes. Given the fact that they've only had a few days to test their car in Bahrain, they need to be very careful on how they're going to set up the car for the first race in Bahrain, because the last thing they want to be is embarrassed in front of the whole world. This is definitely not something that Formula One fans want, because if there's one team that can offer a proper three-team battle to Ferrari and Red Bull, that is definitely Mercedes. The Brackley team has made a huge leap compared to the season, even though problems are still existing right now with the balance of the car. Remember what kind of step was made by Mercedes in 2022. If you compare their performance in the first couple of races, and from Silverstone onwards, the fact that Toto Wolff said upgrades are coming to the car early in the season shows that Mercedes is definitely out for blood this year. As Hamilton said on Drive to Survive, he's coming to take what is rightfully his. That's the 8th record-breaking championship. This is something that, if it happens on a regular basis, would put a smile on every genuine F1 fan's face, especially after what Hamilton had to go through last year with the W13. Whether this will see daylight or not, time will tell. But as of now, Mercedes doesn't seem to like the cars that they've been dealt by the W14 in the first practice testing day in Bahrain. Sure, Hamilton and Russell cannot make a full judgment on the car after their 3 days spent in it, but one thing is for sure, it will need to be tamed just a little bit in the first couple of weeks in the season. Therefore, what do you think about Mercedes sandbagging in Bahrain? Do you think that they're hiding massive chunks of performance? Let us know in the comments below.